Sometimes it's just time to move on. We're going to talk about it on today's podcast.
I've spent the last 20 years studying, teaching, and coaching people to find their greatness and take their lives to the next level. Along the way, it's become evident that emotions are at the root of everybody's successes and failures. Worry and fear are the enemies, and it's time to forge the armor and earn the tools to overcome the two things that could single-handedly destroy your future. Hi, my name is Michael Johnson, and I'm a life coach, a peak performance trainer, and I'm the emotions guy. It's time to take back control of how you feel, control of how you act, and control of how you experience life. It's time to become a lifer, a new breed of overachiever focused on living every minute to its fullest. We are responsible for how we feel, and no one and no thing can make us feel anything. Emotional mastery is our journey, and emotional education and intelligence is the key. We are lifers, and this is Magic for Life.
What's up, lifers? Michael Johnson here with the Magic for Life podcast, and I'm excited that you joined me today because sometimes it's just time to move on. We're going to talk about this a little bit, and we've got a few things to unpack and unravel. First, when and when not to. Second of all, what the heck is perseverance and when should you use it and when should you not? And then you've got to talk about this whole concept of quitting and, well, should you quit or should you not quit? We've been told all sorts of different things. And how do you make a new decision when you've been basically on a path for so long that you can't remember, right? So let's start with when and when not to move on. How do you make a choice about when and when not to move on? Well, through the ages, we've been taught to do pros and cons. So we would take out a piece of paper and write the pros and the cons. And what happens is, and I don't know if you've experienced this, I know I have, but you write down some pros and you write down some cons, and essentially you get more confused. You get more torn in two directions. I don't know if you felt that in your pros and cons sheets, right? But you essentially get torn in two different directions. And now you're even more confused about what to do and how to move forward. And so pros and cons oftentimes don't work like they seem to work, because in many instances, and you may have even had this experience, you get all of your pros and cons written down and you still look at the thing that you want to do and you do that anyway, even though it might be outweighed by the other, right? By the cons, you may still do what it is that you were wanting to do. So pros and cons in many instances just don't work. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, man, they don't work. Basically, they just get you torn in two different directions, and they create a dichotomy, meaning a paradox or something that's pulling you in two different directions, and it instantly confuses you. And there have been many times in my life, I don't know about you, but there have been many times where someone has helped me go through the pros and cons, and then they end up just saying, well, you're just going to have to decide what you're going to do. Well, I knew that beforehand, and they knew that beforehand, but they were hoping that maybe by me bringing up both the good and the bad, that I could somehow see which one was better and which one was worse. And yet, in many instances, you might have a ton of pros on the list and you still go with the cons. Okay, so using a pros and cons list isn't necessarily all that helpful. Might just get you more confused, right? So how do you deal with that? Well, there's lots of different ways. You can meditate and try to get yourself back in alignment. You can go up and become one with nature, and that works really great too. I've done both of those things. You can find your favorite music and zen out for a bit. You can dig into something that allows you to take your mind off of the pros and the cons. For me, in many parts of my life, that was dance, right? And turn on the music and you dance and you get into a space, a zone that allows you to be not where you were. And that seems like maybe escapism, right? Or trying to just escape from where you were. But the thing is that sometimes you have to provide a little bit of release or reprieve from the resistance that you have created through thinking about your pros and your cons. You think about this, you think about that, you think about this, you think about that, and all it does is it creates a stretch, right? It's like taking one of those therabands or rubber bands and pulling it two different directions and hoping one way is going to give. Well, it does, and it smacks the other side of it, and it doesn't feel good. Never does, right? That's a funny metaphor, but hang with me for a second. So when and when not to move on? Well, one of the best choices you can make is what aligns with you and your soul. And I know that's a little deep, right? But what aligns with you and your soul? Well, okay, I'm not sure, Michael. I don't know what aligns with me and my soul. How do I get in alignment? And again, I'm going to say we can use some outside sources when you haven't practiced it, but it's always best from the inside. The outside sources are things like music and dance and maybe even playing an instrument or doing something that's artistic. That is one of the benefits of the arts, is it helps you to escape into a place that is inside, that comes from inside of you to help you get in alignment with you. And so many of the arts are beautiful options for you to do that because they allow you to release some of the resistance that you have created by giving yourself opposite choices and creating some tug on your soul. So what we want to do is we want to get into alignment using one of those things. The more you practice doing some simple meditation, maybe even just 15 minutes a day, you don't have to do a huge amount. You might find if you start doing 15 minutes that you might want 20 or you might want 30 or an hour. You might start to find and enjoy and appreciate the connection to oneself. And the more you do it, the better you are. Now, there's multiple ways and multiple purposes and reasons for meditating. We can chat about that some other time, right? But the practice of doing that helps you get back in alignment with yourself. Now, as a dancer, alignment is huge. If you're not in alignment, the movement doesn't work as well. If you're not in alignment, things don't flow across the floor. You have a hard time finding momentum. You have a hard time finding body flight. And in dance, those are all absolutely necessary. But being able to get in alignment is one of the first steps. You see, when you are pulling in two different directions from that pros and cons sheet that you filled out, you're essentially not in alignment. You're tugging, you're playing tug of war with your emotional state and with the desires that you might have in two different directions. But when you get in alignment, things start to flow. It's like putting a boat in a stream and going downstream. It's much harder to go up, much easier to go downstream, right? Now, you could persevere, but think about the weight of the word persevere. If you're heading downstream in a boat, are you persevering? Well, not really. You're not really persevering. You're enjoying the ride. If you've been on a lazy river, maybe at a water park or something, sitting in a tube, it just takes you around in a circle and you just chill. But when you try to get out, have you noticed there's people bumping into you and you create resistance? The water's trying to flow by, people are trying to get by, and it's a little bit challenging even to get out sometimes because everything's good. But if you just go with the flow, it's a piece of cake. Right? Perseverance implies that you're fighting or going against the grain. Now, I'm not saying that everything is going to always just be easy, but I am saying that it might be easier than you think if you can get in alignment with yourself and with the desires that you have. Well, what is that? Well, you have to decide what you want. You have to decide the things that you actually want, not what everybody else wants, not what somebody else wants for you, not what they say or she says or he said or they said. not what mom and dad want, not what boss wants, but what you want. So when should you quit? Well, quitting is such an interesting word because it is been created maybe by the industrial age, right? Maybe by this age of you should be an employee and you should work for me forever and you're not allowed, don't be a quitter. You got to stick it through. I don't care if you hate what you do. I don't care if you don't like what's going on. Don't quit. Why? Because I need an employee and I need somebody to work for me. Well, that's not a very good mentality, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not dogging on employees because businesses all over the world wouldn't work unless they had employees. But you see, when it's a win win, now we're talking. When that employee gets to do the thing they love, but they don't have to take on the liability of owning the business, that is a big deal because there are some people that are not really meant to take on the liability of a whole business. They're better to just do the thing they love, do it well, and help that business bring the message to the populace. But you might be that person that is wanting to take on the liability, that you are willing to take the risk, that you are willing to do something outside of yourself and take a chance. That might be you. And if it is, well, then now you've got to make some new decisions, right? And if you're in that employee position, but you're looking at it and the call of entrepreneurship, the call of the wild, right? This idea that, hey, I can give something to the world more, and I'm willing to take on the liability and responsibility of running a business. Well, then it might be time to move on from your current employed situation. Now, doesn't mean you have to do it all at once. You can do it over time. It depends on what your level of risk is and your level of comfortableness with uncertainty. But if you need lots of certainty, then maybe you do both at the same time for a little while until you are certain that you're safe and secure in making the jump to being a full-time entrepreneur. Right? But when you are making new decisions, what I can tell you is that if you're not in alignment, if you haven't, just like a dancer, gotten yourself and your body, your skeleton, your presence and person in alignment with yourself, with you, then you're not going to make good decisions. You're going to make decisions that you might regret later on. And so what I would highly suggest is you take on the practice of meditation. Take 15 minutes and try to quiet your mind. Now, remember, there are lots of different ways and lots of reasons for meditation. So it's not just, one thing. So maybe just giving yourself a chance to quiet the chatter that doesn't matter in your head. You might find out that if you're in alignment, you'll start to act and move in better ways. This is huge. So let's think about it like this. And mostly, I'm talking to a bunch of entrepreneurs and maybe some people out there that are maybe thinking, I need to go all in or I need to do a little bit more. And that might be true. And so if you're needing to do that, if a new business or a new idea that you've been putting off and that you really would like to just dig in and try is on your horizon, then let's get it going. Let's go. You got to make that new decision. Sometimes it's just time to move on. Sometimes you're in a situation where if it's not about business, you're in a situation where you need to move on. You know that you've run the course of what it is that you're doing, and it's just time to move on. And sometimes those decisions are challenging. They're tough. They weigh heavy on you. But if you can get back into alignment, if you can get into a space where you are congruent with you, then you'll know whether it's time to move on. And maybe it's not. Maybe it's time to just keep going, because when you get into that alignment, your connection to you tells you that it's time to continue down the line. But if you persevere, right, that word is so heavy. And I appreciate the concept and I appreciate the idea. But most of the time when people talk about perseverance, what they're actually talking about is they love what they're doing, so they're just going to keep going, right? So they're essentially going downstream. But when you start thinking about the word persevere and it's like, I don't like what I'm doing, but I'm going to keep doing it anyway, that's definitely going upstream. That's definitely going against the grain. And you've got to reconsider. But you've got to reconsider from a place of alignment so that you can find momentum and you can find flow. And this is a really, really big deal. So, what I'm encouraging you to do today, I want you to take some action. What action? I want you to do nothing. I know that sounds funny, right? That's one of the most interesting types of action there is. I want you to take some action to do nothing. Get some Zen music. It's all over YouTube. And, you could even listen to an air conditioner. Just search up air conditioner on YouTube, and you'll be able to listen to something that'll allow you to just zone out and just go into a different space. Take 15 minutes. Start today. Maybe try it tomorrow. Maybe do it for a month and see what kind of result you can get when you get yourself in alignment and you can start to head in the direction of flow. Not upstream, not perseverance, not against the grain, not I'm going to grit my teeth and bear it. None of that. Just I'm going to go with the flow and align with who I am and what I'm all about. I encourage you to do this today. You got this. You can do it. You can actually go with the flow, and you have some amazing things that are maybe locked up. Maybe they're already coming out, but they're inside of you and they're ready to come out of you. So it's time. It's time to take those things and let them flow. Hope you enjoyed this podcast today. Throw us a like and a subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on iTunes or any other podcast platform, leave us a rating and let us know how we're doing. We'd love to hear from you. And as usual, don't forget to find the magic for life. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Hey lifers, we expect upgrades to the base operating functions of the things like our phones, cars, and even refrigerators. Why then has it not been made a priority that we upgrade the operating systems of our emotional states? We dance around the subject of emotional mastery from a young age. We have so much more knowledge in today's world, yet we're still teaching outdated methods of emotional education, if any are being taught at all. It's time for a change. It's time for an upgrade to our emotional education. Let me help you learn how to do that. Pick up your free copy of Every Minute at everyminutebook.com.